everyone, and a warm welcome to this session on book review discussion. And the book that we are talking about today is Film, Cinema and Movies: How Internet is Shaping the Entertainment Industry. Today, we are fortunate that two of our guests have joined us. We have with us Dr. Meera Shirodkar, who is a PhD in films from Southampton University, UK, and is currently working with Bennett University. We also have with us Professor Gauri Chakravarti, is an alumnus of FTII Pune and has been a part of the audio-video industry since 1995. And she has been associated with various projects in industry as well as academia, currently working as professor with the Bennett University. We welcome both of our guests today to the studio. And as we all know that we are going to discuss about this book and what it all culminates, what it is holding in it for us. So I would first like to ask Professor Gauri, what do you think is the relevance of this book?
I think the book is very relevant. It has great scope of being read by those who are curious about cinema and storytelling in this country.
Ask you the same thing in terms of the scope and the relevance that this book has for students in particular or the general readers.
I think whenever we are looking at cinema and film, and it's always a very interesting and engaging subject. And I think for a reader now, it's very important for a book to not just talk about the past, but also talk about the future. And I think this book does that very effectively because it's not just looking at what used to happen in cinema, it is talking about what are the future developments, what are we currently dealing with in terms of the industry structures, in terms of how cinema is being consumed. It also touches upon OTT platform consumption.
Right.
So it really touches a lot on the contemporary aspects, which definitely make it relevant to current, not just cinema goers, but also students in particular.
Right. So Professor Gauri, you've been working in this industry, audiovisual, academia as well as industry for a very long time. What do you think, how come this culmination of OTT has happened in India and how is it having an impact, especially on the youngsters of the country?
So I think we'll have to look at it from a very wholesome perspective. If you historically place, television, the entry of television in this country in the 1980s, early 1980s, we consider that to be a great landmark in terms of the thinking of generations and how an entire society was able to relook at its own self with newer stories. I think 1992 again was a landmark period for us with the economic liberalization and the global interface, and that trickled in a new thought process. But what we see today is actually a culmination of so many of those aspects, because a lot of those who started creating content for these newer platforms actually belong to the single broadcast generation.
Yes.
And they understand, the feeling to get associated with collective memories.
Right.
Yet they know that they are catering to a niche audience. Yes. So it's been a very slow and steady process, which the book also is revealing. And it's an exciting time. It's an exciting time for those who are full of stories. Earlier, the way our industry was structured, you had limited gates that were open for people who are entering.
Right.
Because also of the production ecosystem that we have.
Yes.
But what this also has done is it's democratized entry. It's not only democratized storytelling, not only has it revolutionized how we listen to and see and view the socio-politique through our content, but it's also allowed so many youngsters who earlier may be on the sides to come and play in the center.
Right.
So it's given opportunity to younger point of view. It's also created a certain structure in the ecosystem itself. So no wonder a lot of young students who do mass communication or who do filmmaking as courses, no wonder today their absorption in the corporate structures of the industry are more seamless. They kind of get attention if they deliver. Earlier even being recognized was such a long journey.
Huge thing, yes. You just said there is this kind of structure that has emerged in the OTT, just the way it was in the traditional media earlier. So can you throw some more light? And then I would like to ask the same question from Meera.
So would you be talking about the industry structure or
Yes,
the way the story...
the industry structure and as well as the storytelling.
So let me begin with the storytelling, which is a little more exciting.
Yeah.
Earlier, when we would train students, we talk about the dramatic arc. We talk about the 3-act structure. Today, the 3-act structure has completely gone through an innovation. I mean, it's gone through a rejig. So today in class also, when we talk to students, we are talking about Don Herman's 8-story cycle.
Yeah.
Also look at the way content has got episodic. हमें हमेशा याद था कि रामायण और महाभारत जब बड़े लोग हमें बोलते थे तो वो अध्यायों में होते थे.
Yes.
और जो हमारी ओरिजिनल इंडियन स्टोरी टेलिंग है, there was a lot of relevance of the pieces of story in it. Abhi, I have told you the story till now. Tomorrow we will, let's
Discuss
deal with
something
how
else.
then, some hero went in.
Yeah.
So originally that aspect was there, but when you have a 3-hour format, when that is the only format that exists, so that is why when television came in, it brought in a rupture.
Yes.
And we were, next week we will see what happens. But I think in terms of story, what the OTT has done, it just created this huge hunger.
Yeah.
And all of us love telling stories, or human beings love listening to stories, if it is well told.
Yes.
Now the other thing is, if it is not being well told, you're also giving franchise to the audience. Mujhe nahi sunna.
Yeah.
I can go to the next
Pass
one.
to the next.
So this whole thing of I'm not the only one. I will have to respond to
Yes.
whoever's. So one part is that. In terms of when you say the production structures, 1998 is a very important year in our industry, because we officially got an industry status to the filmmaking process, and with with all the global entities coming in today, if you look around, there are formal studio structures where the studio is also looking for someone new to come in and take some space.
Right.
The earlier production ecosystem was very driven by kinship. It may be driven now also by kinship, but there are other possibilities also.
Yes.
It was also highly risky because the way finance was sourced was very much dependent on networks and a different kind of credibility.
Right.
But today you have official processes with which you can propose, get commissioned. So all these streaming
Platforms.
institutions, platforms also have commissioned projects.
Yes.
Which earlier used to be, again, I'll go back to, because your book does that fantastically, which also used to be in Doordarshan. Commissioned projects and, sponsored projects.
Right.
But imagine so many commissioned projects on so many platforms. How exciting could that be?
Dr. Meera, how do you see OTT evolving, especially, with respect to the younger generation? Since I don't think you come from the generation where they are so emotionally attached to television as a medium. So considering that, how do you see OTT coming and taking a place and taking a huge portion of everything? Yeah. We have seen that even advertising has slightly gone down in news channels, as well as all the other various traditional media that have been there. And newspaper will soon be extinct, at least in the physical format. So how are you looking at it in totality?
I think what OTT platforms has done is given the consumer or the audience a sense of autonomy.
Yeah.
Like there is a lot of choice that I have, and there are lots of choices that I get to make.
Right.
So there's less of, when Gauri ma'am talks about, the television time, we had a very limited selection. So we knew that हमें इसी content के अंदर ही we had to find our space.
Yes.
But now the new consumer knows that, okay, if I don't get what I would like to watch on this platform, I can go to the other platform. And neither are they limited by technology. So it's now, like even the book mentions, we are going from, laptops, from television sets to laptops to now mobile phones. So I can consume multiple things at any given point in time. I'm actually looking at entertainment 24/7. So what it is doing is that it's giving me as an audience so much more access and so much more variety. But at the same time, I am also very clear that if there is no good content, I will not give it that viewership.
So consumer once again is the king. That is
Yeah,
an
pretty
interesting
much.
thing to note. Yes. And how do you see, since you have done your PhD also in films, how do you see this book as filling up the gap of a good reference material in general?
Actually, when I was studying for my PhD, one of the things that used to always sort of make me feel a little bit disappointed was the lack of material on Indian cinema.
Good resource
So,
material, you
good
mean.
resource material, good reference material on Indian cinema or Indian film industry, because a lot of it one had to adapt from what was done for Hollywood or Western or European cinema.
Right.
So we had to, cull out perspectives from that. But I'm glad that there is now this, books like these give scholars an opportunity to actually look at content from someone who is looking at it from the Indian perspective and not just a Western perspective, because this is very culturally sound also.
Right.
Because you look at the Indian culture and you look at how it's relevant to the Indian audiences in a way that actually makes it relevant to Indian scholars.
Right,
I
right.
would say.
We would discuss at length how
Yeah.
culture and what kind of a role books like these or resource materials like these play when we talk about creating culture.
Rashika, just to add to that.
Yeah.
So anyway, Mir is absolutely right that when you look at Indian cinema and research, you wouldn't find enough the correct kind of combination. I think what's also interesting about the book is that it condenses everything in one particular. So it's a one-stop shop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes
That is
what happens is not every reader is looking for this specialization reading.
True.
There are
Very
many
true.
of us, including us,
Yeah,
even at this
yeah,
stage.
yeah.
We like to read for a generic view,
Yes.
also of the industry. And that was the first thing that hit me as I started reading. That if there was a younger person or even somebody later in career says, okay, let me just do like a review of kya ho raha hai, what is
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
And this book will come in very handy.
Yeah.
Yes, specifically because a lot of people are also interested in knowing more about cinema, knowing more about OTT, and where from this entire gin of OTT has emerged
Yeah.
in our, in our living rooms, in our entertainment world.
Correct.
So the idea was that anybody who's just curious to know what it is should get the whole story in the book.
And you said digital marketing.
Yeah.
Let's say some student is not interested in filmmaking, but for his or her career just wants to understand the scope of filmed entertainment for their own digital marketing
Yes.
scope.
Right.
Such a book will just show them the intersection of
Yeah.
creation and technology.
Yeah.
And also how it kind of evolves.
Right, right. So, and how do you see the bridging of gap between academia and industry? I'd like an answer from both of you on this.
When you look at the industry, now we have a much bigger cohort of students wanting to learn about filmmaking before they step into the industry. That was not the norm earlier. Earlier it was, the more you did, the more you learned.
Yes.
And now we have a much more educated audience, which is saying that, no, let me learn first. Let me get my hands, dirty with learning everything. And then I'll step into the professional domain as a professional. So I'm more sound and I have a better perspective on the kind of stories or the content I want to create. So I think these kind of endeavors really help bridge that gap between the industry and academia, because they're not as they're no longer that different anymore. And we also have practice based PhDs. We have scholars who are looking at practical work, translating that into an academic way.
Yes.
So we are really not looking at one kind of format anymore. Thankfully, academia is also evolving with time.
Right.
So I think we're keeping pace.
And when we talk about the entertainment sector, we say that it has become format-free zone these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, what is your take, Professor Gauri?
Yeah, so I'd agree completely that no longer academia and industry are in silos.
Yeah.
The moment a university system or a training system launches a professional course, these are, professional courses in media, mass communication, journalism, it is understood that there will be a mix
Yes.
of industry point of view and academic point of view. For example, when I was reading through the book, I think chapter 5 or 6 talks about networking and collaborating.
Yeah.
Now, if you imagine a classroom where I had some students sitting and, I would be giving them some tips based on my experiential, learnings that, when you network, do this or do that or don't. But look at what the book does. The book says that may be social culture, in the sense socialization, that you are part of industry, but it also says there are, platforms that no longer rest, put your stakes on the little party where you'll meet two people.
Right.
The book is letting you know there may be online platforms where people across the world are collecting, like Mandy, for example.
Yeah.
So then the curious learner will be, pushed to maybe look at Mandy.
While we're talking of the OTT, while we're talking of the structure that it has come across and the kind of structure that prevailed earlier with the industry, the kind of opening up that is happening in the cinema or in the world of OTT, how do you see the actors who draw these special characters, emerging? And Meera, would you answer this? How have the actors emerged in the entire, culmination of the OTT? And what forms have they taken? How has it opened a greater scope for more number of actors these days?
I think because OTT became or seems like a very democratic space. So, and a lot of the bigger stars were reluctant to come on OTT platforms
Initially, yes.
So that was a brilliant opening for a lot of actors who were willing to give it a chance. And then you had people like Pankaj Tripathi, Jaideep Alawat, who may not have got their due on the silver screen with prominent roles, but because they were willing to be a part of shows that may not have appealed to mainstream stars. So they took that gamble and it really paid off because we saw them become those characters and people relating to them much more than what they would have with probably their films. And now we see a reverse trend of mainstream stars coming to OTT platforms and finding success there instead of in films.
Yeah.
And I think actors have really evolved with this. They are now not looking at cinema as just the Friday opening sort of scope.
Yeah.
They are seeing the scope that as long as it's good content, if we are part of it, we will reach the audience and the audience will be receptive to us.
But also at the same time, we'd appreciate that earlier movie going theater was an experience, a family thing, or something with friends, hanging out with friends meant movie. So now that is not the case anymore. It's more of let's Netflix and chill. So that's the usual way that people look at it. So what do you have to say on that, Professor Gauri?
So can I begin with the earlier question
Yes.
about actors? So I just had one point to give. See, everything that appears on screen, there's a huge back end to it. And the back end is made of multiple processes. What's also happened is that because of our production ecosystem changing, today we do casting in the way it is done.
Right.
We have casting agencies who have portfolios. So because this back end has changed, because there's a corporatization, there is a structure to the making, it's not as if earlier there was a dearth of actors in the market. We've had people from traditional backgrounds of, training in theatre and NSD, the great actors from NSD being in and around. But the funnels of reaching a project and also the reception of the content was very different. So at all stages, actors being created, projected, identified, eliminated if the role is not suitable, even if there are stars, and then also consumed through the audience, has gone through a tectonic shift in this country.
Right.
And therefore, even the audience is respecting a Jaideep in a Patal Lok because they are recognizing that this person can deliver.
Yeah.
Yeah? The same journey couldn't have happened if the casting agency, which is the middleman, and casting agency, again referring back to the book's focus on technology, casting agencies hugely depend on online portfolios, on looking for people beyond their geographical territories. So that also is happening.
Yeah.
Then there is this, this non, or maybe say de-glamorizing of how we deliver dialogues.
Right.
That also has helped many actors to remain in their original style and yet, act for the character.
Right.
So even creatively, a lot has happened. And coming back to the original idea of, a family going to a film, and it's not just going to a film, the whole decision to go to a film. Oh, this Friday or this Saturday.
Collecting a review.
A 3 o'clock show. Be ready. Khana pehle kha lena. Gaadi should have petrol. That kind of thing. Somehow, with this multiplication of content, there's one thing I always feel, we have lost our collective memories.
Yes.
Initially, at that point, what would happen? One dialogue and the entire family would know the context. Yeah. Today, people have multiple screens in the house. There are mobile phones. For example, a younger person may be looking at Japanese anime. And an older person may be looking at Bandish Bandits. A father may be looking at Fauda. It's a mixed bag. I'd say it's a mixed bag.
Right.
It allows us to open a lot of windows. Look at windows and peep into stories we want to. But that whole thing of a collective memory, that we have lost as a...
Exactly. Which, brings me to this point that our children are anyways not socializing. They are socializing more with the devices. So even if the mom is sitting in the next room, they would write a message, I'm hungry. So with that happening, and with us not making, family is the basic unit in any society. And the stronger the family is, the stronger the family values are, the better a society grows. Here we are looking at a scenario where there is a dearth of socialization. Don't you think OTT is adding to it? There is more of seclusion, there is more of existence in silos, there is more of, maybe you can, because there are so many things that are happening on the screen, you may not be comfortable in sharing the same things with your father, as comfortable as you would be with a friend. And this holds true for all age groups.
I have a mixed answer for it, which is that, if you remember, we call a huge period of cinema as the Nehruvian era.
Yes.
And we do it not because... just like that. We call it that because there was a focus of cinema and cinema makers to reflect on the nation, on the diversity and unity in diversity. So I always feel that art of any form, in any form, does the great role of propagation of values in a social system. People would say, what is art? This person has a passion for art. But they don't understand that that person's passion sometimes governs the way a community thinks.
Yes.
And art can really trigger emotions and aspect of the subconscious that many other things can't. And therefore, going back to the collective memory, our older films, when the family would watch it, there were also messages that all of them were taking back.
Yes.
Good versus evil. The ending was that the hero always wins. But we're also taking home the fact that if you are good, you will win.
Yes.
Now what's happened is there's segregation.
Yeah.
So yes, it is allowing us to see a lot of cultural products from other communities. But at the end of the day, that binding that art had within its structure of, discussion.
Yes.
Like I remember I saw Sur Sangam with my mother. And for days we were discussing the film only. And how, classical forms and their teaching are done. But let's say if I was a young person and I was seeing something on OTT and she was seeing that, those conversations wouldn't have happened.
Right.
But
Absolutely.
this is one part of it. See, at the end of the day, technology will democratize.
Yeah.
It will open many doors, and then families will also have to figure out their own mix of communicating.
But
Yeah.
here I must add that during the pandemic, when there was no content available, we went back to watching Mahabharat and Ramayana on Doordarshan as a family, and it was amazing.
Yes, absolutely. And it was such a, I would say,
Yeah.
breath saver for
Yeah,
everybody.
everybody.
For at least
And-
1 hour, you would forget what's happening in the world, how pandemic
Absolutely.
has hit us.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
yes, and it was indeed a very engaging discussion. And I so feel that everybody who has seen this discussion, they will understand what exactly is going on in the entertainment sector today and probably give this book a read, which it very well deserves. Thank you all very much
Thank you so
for
much,
joining us
Dr.
today.
Shikha. Thank
And
you so
I hope you had a nice time enjoying this discussion. Namaskar.